And a lot of the neurotransmitters and things in the brain that the brain uses for communication purposes, these are essentially made from things like amino acids, right?
Yes, so most neurotransmitters are do ultimately come from amino acids or which come from protein. And some of those amino acids we can make ourselves and others we can't. Others we have to get from the diet. So and so for example, the amino acid tryptophan, which is an essential amino acid that we must get from the diet because we can't make it ourselves. That amino acid is used, for example, to make neurotransmitter called dopamine. And of course, I'm explaining, I know that you are a neuroscientist, so you don't need to know this, but I'm just explaining this for your listeners and viewers who might not be familiar with that. So oftentimes you can use tryptophan, for example, to make serotonin and melatonin, which is our sleep, our circadian rhythm hormone. So you can use tryptophan to make a variety of different neurotransmitters. And if you don't have enough tryptophan, then you won't be able to make enough of those neurotransmitters. And those neurotransmitters are the same neurotransmitters that many of the psychiatric medications are designed to try to support the activity and levels of in the brain.
I see. So something like serotonin is made from the amino acid tryptophan, as are other things in the brain. Melatonin's an example. Some psychiatric medications, so like SSRIs for depression, boost serotonin levels. They're serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So, in essence, you can at least directionally do similar things with food through altering the diet that you could do with a psych med. That's basically what you're saying.
I don't know if I'd put it quite that way. Yes. So the way, for example, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor works, like Prozac or Zoloft or Paxil, Celexa, those medications, like you said, they're reuptake inhibitors. So they basically slow down the recycling of those neurotransmitters, so they stay in between the cells longer and the synapses longer, so they can perhaps work a little better.
Mm-hmm.
And the food can't really do that. But if you're eating in the wrong way, you can destabilize that system. So if you're not getting enough of the amino acids, you may not have enough tryptophan to make those neurotransmitters. But also, if you're eating the wrong way, you can throw that pathway that regulates the production of those different neurotransmitters out of balance. So if you're eating properly, all of this should work without you having to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're eating the wrong way, you can really run into a lot of trouble pretty quickly. And you might be told that you need medication to help rebalance the system. But like I said, I was trained that the biological root causes of most mental health conditions were chemical imbalances and things like neurotransmitters, but we never stopped to think or talk about, well, what's causing those imbalances in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And in eating the wrong way has a profound effect on the regulation of those systems.
So, in principle, you could be deficient in something like tryptophan. It's an essential amino acid. We can only get it by eating it in our food. And because it's the precursor to things like serotonin, you can throw off sort of the balance of serotonin by being deficient in tryptophan. How common is that? Are there very many people walking around that aren't getting enough tryptophan or something else?
Not in the developed world, typically. I mean, most people in the developed world are getting enough protein, and some people aren't getting quite enough, or they're not getting quite the right mixture or the ideal mixture of amino acids. But most people, fortunately, at least, and some of us are very lucky to live in parts of the world where we have access to enough high quality protein. That's not true in great parts of the world where malnourishment and access to, especially to animal foods, is very, very limited. And that can cause a great deal of a lot of mental and physical health problems, of course. So, but yes, in the developed world, we don't typically see a lot of protein malnutrition the way you would see in places which are far less fortunate.
Hmm. So there's something kind of interesting there because you said that in many places in some places in the world that are less developed and malnutrition is a much bigger problem, they can be amino acid deficient, and that's often because they lack animal sources of protein. That's not a problem that we have here in the United States. We have plentiful food around, and yet I'm often hearing people say, "Well, I should be getting most of my protein from plants." So what's going on there?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because that is the prevailing and increasingly the popular view and the prevailing sort of official information, the guidelines that we're getting both from our governmental guidelines, but also from prestigious institutions like the Harvard School of Public Health or Tufts University and other prestigious and the World Health Organization, the USDA dietary guidelines. So more and more the message that people are getting is that plant proteins are superior, healthier. Plant foods in general, the more plants you eat, the healthier you are. The fewer animal foods you eat, the healthier you will be. And so essentially plants good, animals risky, or perhaps even dangerous. The truth about the biology of the differences between plant and animal foods and what human biology requires is almost exactly the opposite of that message. And so it's very concerning to me that this message is being absorbed by people and really taken to heart. I mean, people really feel strongly about. I mean, a lot of people want to be healthy, and so they're following this information and they're taking it to heart, and they're changing their diets and they're eating fewer and fewer animal foods and more plant foods. And this is not the way our biology functions at its best. Plant proteins, with few exceptions, there are a few exceptions, do not contain enough of the right mixture of essential amino acids to meet our needs. Whereas every animal food contains enough of the right types of essential amino acids to meet our needs without our even having to think about it.
Mhm. Is a simple way for people to think about this, perhaps that so obviously our body's made out of proteins. The proteins are made out of amino acids. The amino acids aren't all a present in equal amounts. There's a particular distribution that our muscles have and our brains have, et cetera, et cetera. So when we think about something like red meat, like beef, should people just think of that as like, okay, we're eating the muscle of a mammal, we're a mammal and we've got muscles. So you're going to naturally have a lot of the same amino acids distributed in that food source that are in our bodies. And it's going to be much closer to the distribution of our bodies than something like, I don't know, that what you would find in lentils or something.
That's exactly right. And so, we are animals. We are actually we are actually made of red meat and saturated fat and cholesterol. And yet we're told that those are the very things that are dangerous for us. And plants, most plants are much lower in saturated fat. Most plants lack the amino acids that we need in the right mixtures. And most plants contain different types of fats than the ones that are ideal for the ones that are essential to our brains and bodies optimal functioning. So plants they're not well suited. They're not ideally suited to be the foundation of the human diet. It's not that they're all dangerous or that everybody needs to stop eating them, but really we must if we're looking for optimal health, meaning nourishing every cell in our bodies optimally with all of the essential nutrients in the right proportions, the most safe and reliable and complete way to do that is with animal foods and not plant foods. Animal foods, we are animals, so we have a lot more in common with them. And the molecules that they contain are the ones that we need.
Hmm.
And they're more bioavailable, they're more plentiful, they're much easier to find. And they do not come with rare exceptions, they do not come with any anti-nutrients to interfere with our ability to absorb them. And they do not come with any, again, with rare exceptions, with any toxins that pose risks to our health when we eat them.
Hmm.
This is not the case with plant foods. Plant foods protect themselves with chemical weapons, and these do pose risks to human health. And they also guard their nutrients with anti-nutrients that make it, in many cases, more difficult for us to access their nutrients. So just because a plant food may contain a nutrient, so if you're reading a label, you may see that the plant food contains something, doesn't necessarily mean that you have good access to it. And I
Mhm.
think that's a little known nutrition secret.
So if let's give people like an example or two here. So, if you're eating grass-fed beef and it's got 20 grams of protein in it, and then you're eating, say, lentils or beans, it's got 20 grams of protein in it. They both say they have 20 grams of protein on it. They both actually contain 20 grams of protein, but what's the difference there? You're going to absorb different amounts of that for different reasons?
Yes, so plant proteins, so the plant foods that are highest in protein are the nuts and legumes. Legumes being, beans and peas and lentils, and soy, things like that. So when people are trying to meet their daily protein requirements through plant foods alone on a vegan diet, they really need to include legumes and nuts in their diet because that's where most of the protein in plants is. So the problem is that it's not protein that we're after. As you said before, it's amino acids. It's this particular mix of amino acids. So all proteins are not created equal. And most people who are following a vegan diet already understand that and know that they need to be careful about how they plan their diet so they don't fall short in any of these amino acids. But then on top of that extra hurdle that you have to go to deal with in order to nourish your brain properly, you also have to deal with these anti-nutrients and toxins that stand in the way of you safely and reliably absorbing all of those amino acids. So all of the seed foods, including legumes and nuts, these foods contain protease inhibitors
Hmm.
that are really they make it more difficult for our digestive enzymes to break those proteins down into their individual amino acids so that we can absorb them. And those protease inhibitors are there because the plant, quite selfishly and rightfully, wants to hold on to those amino acids for its own selfish purposes. Meaning, if you're a soybean, what you exist in order to nourish an embryo. There's an inside every
Yeah,
bean, there's a little embryo,
it's a
and
baby.
it's going to sprout. It's a bait, and so it needs those nutrients, including those
Hmm.
amino acids. It certainly doesn't want
Yeah,
you getting your grubby paws on
yeah.
them.
They don't want to be eaten, just like an animal doesn't want to be eaten. The difference is that an animal can run away or has spines or has some other way to protect itself. The plant can't go anywhere, and so it
Right.
has to use chemistry.
That's right, and it's very clever chemistry, evolved over hundreds of millions of years. Really smart.
What would be like one or two examples of common plant toxins that are coming in, a normal everyday other plant food that we would otherwise consider to be healthy?
Yeah, so there are toxins and there are anti-nutrients. So in terms of toxins, one of the food groups that I suggest that people who are struggling with mental health conditions uh, avoid are the nightshades. And the nightshades are things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, all of the red spices, some paprika, chili peppers, things like that, and white potatoes, the skins of white potatoes and goji berries. So
Hmm.
these are the nightshades, and they might sound like they have nothing in common, but if you look at the fruit of any of those plants, they all have kind of a little green elfish hat. If you picture an eggplant, it's got that little hat. So
Mm.
tomatoes do too, right? And they're in the same family. And so they protect themselves with chemical weapons. And one of the chemical weapons they protect themselves, one type is called a glycoalkaloid. And these are neurotoxic. So these are toxic to the nervous system. And so if you absorb them to any significant extent, which you can, then that can irritate the nervous system. So this is just one example of a chemical that's naturally occurring in plants, and we're told that all plants are equally healthy and that the more we eat of them, the better, and that we need a wide variety. We have to eat the rainbow. We need a We're never taught to think about each different type of plant food as unique. Some are riskier and healthier than others. And I
Hmm.
think it makes sense to really give them their due. You don't lump them all together in one category. They're very different types of foods that have different vitamins, different minerals, different chemicals in them, different risks and benefits. They're not all the same, and they're not all necessarily good for you.
Mhm. And so on the anti-nutrient piece, so these are things that sort of prevent the absorption of the nutrients that are otherwise in these things. Is that why, like I've seen a lot of data out there around certain micronutrients and their bioavailability across animal and plant foods, everything from calcium to other vitamins and stuff. Is that why you often see with plant foods that although it might contain X number of milligrams of this, that, or the other vitamin, you often don't absorb very much of that?
Yeah, so a really good example is phytic acid or phytate. And this is widespread in plants, but it's especially, you especially find large quantities of it. And again, the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, which are all essentially seeds that contain embryos. Those are the most heavily defended parts of plants, is of course where the embryo is housed. That you're protecting the future generation of that species, right?
Mm-hmm.
So grains, beans, nuts, and seeds all are rich in phytic acid, and phytic acid is a mineral magnet, a very powerful one. And it's
Mm.
there to hold on to, when you think about it, a seed, what does a seed need to deal with? A seed might need to sit for days, months or years waiting for the conditions to be right to sprout.
Yep.
And while it's sitting there, it's dealing with the environment. It's dealing with little creatures that are coming up to, gnaw on it. And how is it going to survive? So it needs to protect itself with toxins, but also with anti-nutrients. Phytic acid is there to guard, to hold on to calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc for the future sprouting plant that hopes to become a larger plant. And it may need to hold on to those minerals for a very long time. So when we consume, one of the examples I give in the book, and that I give in a lot of my presentations because it's just such an excellent example, easy to understand for people who, if this is a new idea for them, is zinc. So zinc, the food on the whole food on the planet that is richest in zinc is the oyster. So
Mm.
if you eat oysters, there was an experiment done a long time ago that shows this. If you eat oysters, you see your blood level of oyster rise very nicely, and that is a sign that you've effectively absorbed a great deal of zinc from that oyster. If you eat that same amount of oysters with black beans, which is a seed food or a legume, you absorb less than half of the
Hmm.
zinc from those
Ah,
oysters.
so it's not just eating the plant. It's not just plants are difficult for us to extract those minerals from. The anti-nutrients can actually affect the absorption of animal foods that we eat together with the plant foods.
Yes, and this can happen with iron, zinc, calcium, magnesium. It's a very, very common phenomenon in among plant foods. And so, if you eat that same amount of oysters with corn tortillas, again, corn is a grain, so it's a seed, you absorb virtually none of the zinc from those oysters. It's a very powerful effect. It's not subtle at all.
Hmm.
And we often wonder, why in wealthy countries that have access to all kinds of foods do we have so much, for example, iron deficiency?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, even people who are eating animal foods along with the other foods, and that's because we're not given the right information about what are the best food, where are the foods that contain the best and most bioavailable iron,
Hmm.
which are the meat, seafood, and poultry, and which are the foods that are working against our ability to
Hmm.
absorb iron. And those are the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, and the certain types of vegetables as well, and even green tea and other types of things. We are told to base our diets on grains, beans, nuts, and seeds.
Hmm.
And these are very low in nutrients, especially the grains and the beans, and very high in anti-nutrients. So they really have not earned their place at the base of the pyramid.